Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jenny Koch, and I'm a Senior Associate Planner with Roadside in Harwell. Today I'm representing the Sustainable Communities Division of the American Planning Association, and we are the host for today's webinar. The division supports planners who are committed to planning for sustainable communities by integrating all aspects of sustainability into our work through the combined economic, social, and ecological factors that shape our communities. Today's webinar is called Planning for a Clean Energy Future with Cities LEAP, or Cities Leading Through Energy Analysis and Planning. And our speakers today are from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL. This webinar is eligible for 1 CM credit for live viewing only. As always, I want to take a second to acknowledge all of our great sponsors. So thank you so much to all these organizations who help us to put on events such as this webinar, our events at the conferences, etc. Our sponsors for 2018 to 2019 include Clarion, Dewberry, MC, Farr Associates, HAF, Montgomery Associates, Niche Engineering, Planning Communities, Robinson & Cole, Smith Group JJR, TESCA, TransformativeTools.org, the Urban Collective, the University of Florida Online Masters of Urban and Regional Planning, and Urban Works. So it's a big group, it's a great group, and we're grateful to have them. Thank you again to all of our sponsors and to all of our division members whose contributions also support our work. If you're interested in volunteering with the division or want to share ideas for webinars or other activities, here's our contact information. We were really excited at the conference to announce the 2018 winners of the Awards for Excellence in Sustainability, as well as our Student Essay Awards, and you can go to our website listed here to find more information about those award winners, and we'll also have some webinars with them in the next year or so. But you can also go to the website to find, the blog site, to find all of our archives of our webinars, including this webinar, which will be up there in the next couple of days in video form, and as well as a downloadable slide version. So today's webinar, again, is called Planning for a Clean Energy Future with Cities LEAP. We have 2 speakers today. I'll introduce them briefly and then let them get started. Megan Day is a certified planner and project leader at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. She serves as the lab's subject matter expert on city energy planning and large-scale photovoltaic development. Megan manages the Cities LEAP project, which provides energy data and analysis to cities to enable more strategic energy decisions. Megan has conducted and published original research into the intersections between city policies and solar deployment, and she also provides technical assistance to local, tribal, and state governments. Our second speaker, Allison Holm, is a planner and project leader at NREL. Her work focuses on state and local solar technical assistance and renewable energy policy strategies. Her core research areas include emerging trends in state solar policies, integrating renewable energy and energy efficiency into local planning, zoning, and permitting practices, residential and commercial solar sector solar financing, and resilience planning. Before we get started, I'll just remind you to please submit questions throughout the presentation via the chat box or by using the built-in Q&A function, which looks kind of like a little speech bubble at the top of your screen. We'll take all the questions at the end, but you can send them at any point. We're happy to have them. And I'll also note, as a last note, if you're having any difficulties seeing the presentations or hearing us, please just send a chat, and I will try to help you troubleshoot. Sometimes, for example, it's simply a matter of changing browsers, so you might want to try that as a first option. But thank you again for joining us, and I'll invite Allison and Megan to take over the presentation.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate it. So this is Megan, and I will be starting you through a tour of the Cities LEAP project and some of the tools and analyses that might be helpful to you in your work. So thanks so much for having us here. And so, can you see my screen at all, or should I share it again here?
I think you'll need to share it one more time.
Okay. I'll do that quickly. And let me know when you see it.
right. Yep, that should be good if you just make it a full screen and then hide that. Yep, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay, so Cities Leap is a program of the Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Division and their Office of Strategic Programs. And it's administered here at the National Renewable Energy Lab. And the goal of Cities Leap is to provide standardized, localized energy data and analysis to enable cities to lead clean energy innovation and integrate strategic energy analysis into decision making. So we're focused on cities because they consume 70% of global energy, and we as planners know that we are becoming an increasingly urbanized world and nation, and so that will only continue to be the case and perhaps even grow as a portion of our energy consumption. So Cities Leap set out to try to help cities make more strategic energy decisions. And we've started with some foundational research. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the things we'll cover here today. The foundational research looked at what kinds of data and analysis do cities currently have. And we found some gaps and tried to fill those gaps through providing a city energy profile for every U.S. city. And I'll spend a fair amount of time on that because there's a lot of components to that. Then we use that data as baseline data to understand the aggregate impact of city-level energy actions. And subsequently, there was also a funding opportunity announcement from the Department of Energy, and there are currently 3 city-led awardee teams that are working on innovative approaches to incorporating energy data in city decision-making processes. And Allison's going to talk through our Data to Decision series, where we try to work with individual cities to create pathways to apply this data to specific energy decision-making processes. So first, let's start out with our foundational research. We surveyed and collected all of the components of city energy plans, that might be a sustainability plan or a climate action plan, from 20 different diverse cities, diverse in population, geographic location, as well as what kind of utility they had. And we looked at their goals, actions, and metrics in those plans, and we found kind of a laundry list of actions that weren't necessarily prioritized by importance or impact, nor were there necessarily metrics with which to measure all of the actions and their impacts. But we did find that of those actions, the most common ones fell in the transportation and land use and buildings and efficiency sectors. And then, of course, a lot of factors go into city energy decision making. So that research helped us understand that data availability was a pretty big gap, and the granularity of that data. There was a lot of data available at the state level, at the county level, but we were kind of lacking at the city level. So we set out to try to help fill some of that, those data gaps, and that resulted in the city energy profiles, where we developed a set of energy statistics for every U.S. city, and that includes 23,468 U.S. cities, including counties in Hawaii, and minor civil divisions, which would be townships and towns in the Northeast. There you see a lot of coverage, and that's the city limits mapped across the U.S. So for every U.S. city, we provided an estimate of electricity and natural gas consumption and expenditures. So this is, again, modeled and derived data. Some people assume that we talk to every utility in the country and figure this out from reported data, and that was not possible. So this is an estimate. If cities have reported data from their utility, it will always be more accurate than this estimate. But there is value to this estimate, of course, when cities don't have access to that data, and also to have a standardized approach to estimating these things across all U.S. cities, which we've been able to use, and other entities have used as well. So here you see some examples of the electricity and natural gas consumption and expenditures data, where we modeled it by sector, and we also compared it to a cohort of other cities with similar population and the same or similar climate zone. So you can kind of understand where your city falls within that cohort. And we also provided data on transportation. So here is actually not derived or modeled data, but collected data from Polk vehicle registration data in every single U.S. city. So we give you a snapshot of what kinds of alternative fuel vehicles you have in each city. And we provide this for 2013 as well as 2016. In 2013, we also have added an average fuel economy for the light-duty vehicles in each city. So here is an example from Oakland, California, where you can see that the MPG, the miles per gallon, is pretty high, and also they have, of their alternative fuel vehicles, 3% are electric. So that's a way to understand what your vehicles look like, and perhaps set some goals or some metrics to measure actions by. Also in the transportation sector, we model vehicle fuel use, on-road vehicle fuel use by gasoline and diesel, and vehicle miles traveled. So I want to take a minute and just invite folks to hop online and explore this data for each individual city that you might be interested in. And to do that, let's see, I'm going to go back to where there's a good link. You can follow that link, or you can just Google DOE space SLED. So that's Department of Energy space State and Local Energy Data. So the SLED site was already in existence, and so we've added, through Cities Leap, a host of information for each city. So I would encourage you to follow along. You'll find an entry page where they have enter your city and state, and you can go directly to your particular city's data, or whatever city you might be interested in. So getting back to on-road vehicle fuel use, again, this is data that everybody models. Nobody has the exact, precise measured data for fuel consumption. But we've got a pretty robust methodology here that is based on all the road segments within each city limit. And we looked at, also, we weighted the fuel consumption by VMT on those road segments by the fuel economy of the vehicles registered in the same zip code, assuming that those vehicles would be traveling local and collector roads more frequently. So there's a small weighting, which I think is pretty unique in this kind of modeling. And then, of course, vehicle miles traveled, total VMT per capita, and then we break it down by road class to help cities understand their transportation sector. So this is all modeled for a 2013 vintage. We're currently working on a 2016 vintage for electricity and natural gas, using some additional data that we've collected in the meantime. So I hope it will be even more accurate than these current estimates. If you go to the Buildings and Industry tab of the SLED site, you will find an estimate of your small building rooftop PV potential for every city. So we've taken data that was flown, LiDAR data, for 128 cities, and we've developed a methodology here at NREL to extrapolate that data and model it for every U.S. city. So here you see the example for Denver, the suitable area for PV, the capacity potential, and the energy generation potential. So again, we hope that this will be helpful to cities in understanding their potential for renewable energy, and also perhaps set some goals and metrics by which to measure those actions. Also, under the Industry and Buildings and Industry tab, we have an estimate of the building stock in every single U.S. city. Now, if you have your county assessor data or something similar, you probably have better data, but this is an estimate based on FEMA's HAZUS data set. So we've got 33 different building types here that we model by both the count of buildings and the area of buildings broken down by sector. And we are working now to update this data. It's a little outdated, using some other additional data sets we have. But this, again, can help cities understand, okay, where might we target our efforts? What kind of percentage of participation rate should we be targeting in terms of the number of buildings, and in what sectors? So it might help cities with that kind of goal setting. Also, in the industry, buildings and industry tab, we have modeled the top 5 electricity and natural gas consuming industries in every city. So if you actually go to the download the data, you will see all industries in every city by 3-digit NAICS code modeled for their estimated electricity and natural gas consumption. So this is from the zip code business patterns data and a host of other data that we've modeled to represent, at least on this website, the top 5. You can download the total estimated industry, industrial and commercial natural gas and electricity consuming industries. So again, here we're providing data that we hope can help cities in setting goals and in targeting particular industries or businesses to help them reach their energy goals. One of the newest components of the Cities Leap data on the state and local energy data site is commercial building energy benchmarking. And so here we've taken measured data that we've purchased from CoStar, which has a pretty detailed record on commercial buildings in every city. And we've tried to provide a chart here that can help cities understand if they set a benchmarking, an energy benchmarking target or ordinance, what kinds of buildings, how many buildings, and what's the square footage of building area that might be impacted, depending on what size threshold they set their targets at. So here for Lakewood, Colorado, if they set a building energy disclosure ordinance at 50,000 square feet and above, you can see the breakdown of the types of buildings that would be impacted. Then we've provided a summary of the on-road vehicle fuel consumption, natural gas consumption, and electricity consumption by sector, summarized for their associated greenhouse gas emissions. So this is modeled for a 2013 vintage again. But here it's helpful for cities to understand which sectors are contributing the most towards their emissions from this group of estimated data. So here I've picked 2 cities that are similar in the population, but if you look at the range here of data, Canton, Ohio actually has about twice the emissions and emission intensity as Redmond, Washington. A lot of that's due toward their generation sources, heavily coal in the Midwest versus higher hydro in the Northwest. Did I just skip one? Yes, there we go. Okay, and Allison will talk about this in a little more in depth, but the newest chart we have on the Cities Leap's website is where we've applied a methodology that we developed and used for the electricity and natural gas modeling to American Community Survey data. And so here we're modeling what kinds of housing and housing units and what kind of income do folks have. So we're trying to help where we got a lot of questions from cities. They wanted to target their energy actions to benefit the low and moderate income population in their communities. And so here we're estimating what kinds of housing and what kinds of income are in those associated households. So here for Aurora, Colorado, you can look and say we've got it broken down by percentage of area median income as well as tenure, owner versus renter occupied. And so if you want to focus on the lowest income population, you want to focus for renter occupied, multifamily, and then single family for owner occupied, depending on your program or your intervention that you're targeting. Also associated with the state and local energy data site, we have built a toolbox of city-level resources related to energy actions. So these include case studies and tools and research that help cities with their energy planning action. So we've got over 500 resources cataloged here that you can search through and look for resources that can help you in your energy decision-making processes. So as I mentioned earlier, we did take all of the data in the city energy profiles, and we used it as baseline data to conduct some analysis to understand what would the aggregate impact be of city-level actions. And we pulled these actions from our foundational research. And so these are common actions that we found in plans. It's not bleeding edge kind of actions that only several cities are taking. And through that research, we understood that building energy codes and public transit increases, actions in those two areas, as well as building energy incentives, which includes building energy disclosure ordinances, that those were the top three kinds of city-level actions that could contribute the most towards carbon emission abatement. And in aggregate, if cities took these sort of common level actions, that we could achieve 35% of the remaining U.S. COP21 target. So it's pretty substantial what these common city energy actions could achieve. And that's in a report that's listed there and also at the end of the presentation if you care to look at it. So we did find that there were regional differences in the carbon abatement potential of different city-level actions. So of course in the Southwest, solar has a higher impact. In the Midwest, building energy-related actions had a greater impact because there's a high heating and cooling load there. On the Eastern Seaboard there, we found that mode shifting and smart growth policies were more impactful because there's higher vehicle miles traveled there, as well as more densely populated cities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and she's going to walk you through our Data to Decisions series, where we worked with individual cities to help create pathways to apply this wealth of data and analysis to city energy decision-making processes.
Great, thanks, Megan. So this is Allison, and as Megan highlighted in a lot of her slides, there's a lot of data and information available on the State and Local Energy Data, or SLED site. And we wanted to work directly with cities to illustrate how this data and information could be incorporated into city energy decision-making. So through that process, NREL partnered initially with 10 U.S. cities, both to understand the most pressing energy-related questions that were popping up around the country, and then to identify and help create these pathways for cities to use the data available on the SLED site to inform energy planning. So there are these 10 cities which are listed here and some of the topics which you can see. And we ultimately came out with 10 short form, what we refer to as micro-technical assistance analyses on the topics outlined here. All of these are publicly available online. And the idea is that other cities can look at the analytical pathways documented in these fact sheets and substitute their own city data in order to replicate the analyses. And in going through this process, we work directly with city staff in each of these communities to better understand the priorities and questions being considered, and then also to work through data issues at the city scale as well. So in a lot of cases, we were able to work with actual city data and replace the estimates that are available on the SLED site, but in other cases, the SLED data provided an analytical pathway forward in evaluating these questions. So a couple of examples that we'll highlight here, and again, you can access all of these online. One of the cities we worked with was San Jose, and they were looking and interested in local rooftop solar generation potential and how that potential could factor into meeting the city's renewable energy goals. So as part of this micro-technical assistance, we developed a conceptual framework for estimating how much of the current electricity consumption in the city could be met with residential and commercial rooftop solar. We used city data and estimates on technical potential, and then as you can see here in this framework developed, looked at the actual market potential, looked at the percentage of small buildings, both residential and commercial, that could potentially support solar development, and then compared that number, that output, to the current electricity consumption to determine how to maximize rooftop solar development and how this might factor into high penetration renewable goals within the city. So that's one example of a type of question that we evaluated. Another example was from Columbia, Missouri, looking at energy actions and policies that would have the greatest benefit for low and moderate income households, particularly renter-occupied households. So one of the things we started on here is looking at census tract level data and Department of Housing and Urban Development data on area median income and housing type. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. We've since developed that line of analysis a little bit more fully and looked at where are low and moderate income residents living in the city, what types of rental units are there, where are people living, what energy are they using for heating fuel type, and then we combine this data to create a more complete picture of where to target actions, what building types to look at, fuel types to look at, and starting to formulate strategies to reducing energy burden in the city. So those initial 10 cities we worked with in 2017, and we've added a couple more for the current fiscal year 2018, Rochester, New York, and Hutchinson, Minnesota. The city of Rochester, one example of one of the highest rates of extreme poverty in the country, and combining this with cold and a snowy climate during the winter, older residential building stock, the city's the mayor's office of Innovation and Strategic Initiatives was really focusing on poverty alleviation and asked for data and analysis to target energy interventions in neighborhoods with the greatest need. So one of the new developments is looking at a similar approach to what we took in Columbia, looking at renter and owner-occupied housing data, housing type, area median income, examining energy burden, and then also developing a new spatial analysis using census tract level data to understand where energy burden and low and moderate income households are concentrated within the city. Along the line of thinking that understanding the geographic distribution of households with high energy burden can inform a more targeted approach for city-related poverty alleviation and interventions within the city. So as Megan mentioned earlier, and as these last couple of examples have really highlighted, a lot of cities that we worked with were asking about how to target energy interventions for low and moderate income communities. And this is it's a topic that NREL is working on through a variety of projects, as well as the Department of Energy. And DOE's Better Building Alliance Clean Energy Low Income Communities Accelerator, or CELICA program, was also involved in the development of this low income energy affordability data, or LEAD tool. It was released earlier this year. One of Megan's earlier slides had a link to the new LEAD tool, and this is using American Community Survey data at the census tract level and aggregating up to the city level. So this slide and the next couple are examples of the type of data that's now available on this through this LEAD tool. And it's developed to support program design, goal setting, pairing with other data available through SLED and other sites, so that cities can start to evaluate the number of households at different income levels, number of homeowners versus renters in their communities, breakdowns of fuel type, building type, construction year, average monthly energy expenditures, energy burden, and other factors that go into developing and designing programs to specifically target low-income communities and reduce energy poverty and burden. So this slide right here is showing data on energy burden, which is a percentage of annual income that is spent on energy compared to the annual income. So that's just one piece of information that's available. Also here, you can see information on the number of housing units by heating fuel type, just helping communities start to understand what energy sources are predominantly used by different housing sectors. And then additional information on average monthly expenditures by heating fuel type for owner and renter occupied units. And all of these charts that are in here and a lot of this information is available in analytical pathways that are part of those 10 community fact sheets that I mentioned earlier. So this is the raw information here, but if you're interested in getting a better sense of how this is being used by communities to evaluate and analyze potential energy actions, there are some examples of how this can be applied at the city level as well. I will turn it back over to Megan to talk about a couple of SOA projects.
Sure, thanks, Allison. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have 3 city-led teams funded by the Department of Energy as part of the Cities LEAP project, and they are each working on different approaches to innovatively integrate city-level energy data and analysis into decision-making processes. So here's an example of one. This is a team led by the City of Bellevue, Washington, and it includes ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. They are looking at drivers of change. What creates the difference between emissions inventory? So here we're looking at an emissions inventory from 2008 and then from 2015, and they did a contribution analysis to understand to what extent did factors like weather and the economy contribute to the change in emissions year over year, and to what extent did city-level actions contribute to that change. So it's a way of understanding the various impacts of city-level actions and also the external exogenous factors. So also an exogenous factor here would include a state renewable portfolio standard, for example, which tends to have a pretty significant influence at the city level. So each of these teams is going to have a webinar and describe their findings. This team is going to develop a tool that will be available to all cities to help them create this similar waterfall chart here and understand the different contributions of factors to their changes in emissions inventories. Another team is led by the City of Portland, and they are looking at the Department of Energy's Asset Score tool and looking at how that Asset Score tool might be able to compare to city energy building performance data and create a metric there with which to prioritize different kinds of actions. So that webinar is coming up. You're certainly invited to join us and understand their research. And then there's a final research project that will be described looking at the SEEDS tool. So we'll distribute that to our Cities LEAP list. So if you'd like to get these kinds of notices and others about new additions to the city energy profiles and new research from Cities LEAP, I encourage you to sign up. If you look at the email updates here and the Stay Informed section, if you sign up there, we'll send you notices. We also try to cover some of this work on the NREL Conduit Twitter feed, and there's the links to the data and the reports that I mentioned earlier on this page as well. So I'm excited to take some of your questions, and we will put up our contact information as well as the Sustainable Communities Division contact information here, and look forward to some good conversation at this point.
Great. Thank you both. We do have a couple of questions lined up, but please do feel free to submit questions using the attendee chat box or the little question bubble for the built-in Q&A function. I was actually kind of curious to start out. It was great to see these examples of how you worked with cities to use the data, because when you were going through the data, I was like, this is great, but I can't wait to see how they use it. How did you choose these cities to partner with?
Sure. So I can't say that there was a very robust application process. We just didn't have the funding to create a lengthy and involved application process. So we looked for cities who had had a touch point and interaction with the Department of Energy or NREL program, and so they demonstrated an involvement and an interest in this, in city energy in some way, shape, or form. And then, so we spread kind of an outreach message, and there was a bit of self-selection there, but we also screened definitely for cities that could benefit the most, I think, from interventions and from the very minimal technical assistance that we were able to provide. And we also looked for a bit of geographic diversity and diversity in the kinds of energy questions and issues that they were tackling.
Great, thank you. We had a question from one of the attendees about, I think it was maybe a statement one of you made about measuring actions aimed at increasing the private deployment of rooftop solar. And she was wondering if you could say more about that. And she said a little bit more that it's her impression that state and federal incentives are aimed at non-rooftop solar, and that she's sensing this like tension between distributed, rooftop solar versus non-distributed utility scale solar collection. And so I think she's sort of wondering how you're measuring those incentives and what incentives you are looking at. And I will let her clarify via the chat box if that's not asking the right question.
Sure. So what we're trying to do is just provide data and analysis that can help cities with goal setting and decision making. So we aren't looking at specific incentives in this kind of research, but we are looking at, for example, we applied this data and these estimates to the city of Lafayette, Colorado, where they're looking at a 100% renewable goal. And the published piece was looking at EV infrastructure expansion, but both they and San Diego and many of the cities in the sort of a secondary question that we answered in a non-published form were interested in the extent to which rooftop PV could contribute to their goals. So helping them distinguish between a rooftop goal and a ground-mounted goal, and perhaps purchasing of other forms of renewable energy, and trying to prioritize and make reasonable goals in that regard. And so this is the kind of data that we tried to provide. And the real takeaway here is that rooftop, you can't get there with just rooftop, right? So we ran this analysis for a number of cities. There's research published on this from NREL, and the rooftop potential really doesn't get any city more than 50% of their electricity consumption. And the higher cities on the 50% side tend to be more in the California area. In the Midwest, it's more in the 30% of potential. And there's a difference, obviously, between technical potential and market potential. So the technical potential is modeled for every city on the SLED site. We looked at a way to sort of alter that to reflect more of a reasonable market potential in terms of who owns the building, how much load could it support within the building. So we're making more reasonable goals rather than every rooftop everywhere could support as much solar as as could fit on there, regardless of the internal building load, et cetera. So yeah, there is a tension, and that's why we're trying to provide this data on rooftop PV potential to understand kind of the limits of rooftop PV potential and where there might be some alternative renewable approaches needed. Does that answer your question? Feel free to follow up, Elizabeth.
Okay, great. And you can obviously follow up with them as well via email if you would like to send and ask your question directly. And that goes for any of you, of course. We do not have any further questions at this point waiting for us. Is there anything that either of you wanted to elaborate on or whatnot? Otherwise, we can certainly wrap this up ahead of schedule.
Okay. Well, I would encourage you to sign up for email updates, and participate in the upcoming webinars on the interesting research that these city-led teams have been doing. We also will be posting updated data and information on electricity and natural gas, as I mentioned, for the 2016 vintage. That will be coming in by the end of this fiscal, or calendar year, I should say. And then we're going to be publishing the methodology, because there's a very distinct and new methodology applied for each sector to help us understand these different metrics. So look for that coming in the fall, and we'll also be posting updated data for transportation, including VMT and fuel consumption next year.
Great. Sorry, we had a couple more things come in, which is good. Can you go back to the slide that had the link for the email updates? There we go.
So form there, that's the energy.gov EERE cities. You can sign up there. You can also go to the City Energy Cities Leap site, the main site, and sign up there. And we'll send you out some notices.
Great. Thank you. Someone else commented that they said this is great work in putting together this website. It has lots of useful information, and they are wondering how you are getting the word out to cities about, besides doing things like this webinar, how are you sort of reaching out to them to let them know that it's available and how they can use it?
Well, we've been reaching out to a number of different entities through webinars like this, as well as conferences and events. It is a challenge with a constrained budget to get the word out, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to work with individual cities to understand, how they might help spread the word about this through their networks, etc. So if you have opportunities to help share this information or apply it to specific regional contexts or state planning processes, we'd be glad to partner with you to help spread the word. There is a recorded webinar about the Cities Leap project on the APA website that's on demand. So if you want more credits, you can visit that and do an on-demand free for members webinar. But yeah, always looking for more opportunities to spread the word. There's such a wealth of data here, and it's particularly useful, I think, for those smaller cities that don't have the staff capacity to collect and analyze this data themselves. And so that was our goal in creating this data for all cities.
Great. Let me see here, make sure we don't. Sorry, we had one more question about getting LEED Green Associate credit for this webinar. We haven't registered for that right now, but if you want to contact apascd@gmail.com, we can try to figure out how to make that happen for you. But otherwise, thank you both again for being here. Thank you for all the attendees listening in. And as I said, there will be a recording of this webinar and the webinar slides up on our website, sustainableplanning.net, within the next couple of days.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. We hope to see you all again next time.